For 100 years, the thorns of the sleeper have guarded a terrible secret. A princess lies trapped in enchanted sleep. But the curse wasn't put on her. She chose it. Because the ancient wolf god living inside her soul had gone mad with rage, and she was the only prison strong enough to hold it. Now a ruthless alpha warlord has burned through the briars, shattered the seal with blood magic, and awakened her for one reason: to claim her devastating power as his weapon. But he made one fatal mistake. This sleeping beauty is no helpless victim. She's more dominant, more dangerous, and far more powerful than the monster he thought he could control. And when their forced marriage binds them as fated mates, everything he planned begins to crumble, because now he must choose: conquer her or love her. But can a butcher and a beast ever find redemption in each other's arms? Or will the darkness inside her destroy them both? The ancient forest knew death when it approached. Prince Malik felt it in the way the trees seemed to lean away from his army, how even the birds fell silent as his warriors passed beneath their branches. Good, let the world fear him. Fear was the only language it understood. "My lord," Casimir's reedy voice cut through the pre-dawn darkness. The court magician clutched a leather-bound tome against his chest like a shield. "The briar hedge is just ahead. We should prepare the ritual before the sun rises fully." Malik didn't slow his pace. Behind him, 200 wolves moved in perfect silence, some in human form with weapons gleaming, others already shifted, their massive bodies rippling with barely contained power. At his right hand walked Rowan, his beta, scarred face set in grim determination. "You're certain this will work?" Rowan asked quietly, for Malik's ears alone. "Does it matter?" Malik's voice was cold as winter steel. "We've come too far to turn back now." The hedge appeared through the mist, like something from a nightmare. Thorns as thick as a man's arm twisted together in an impenetrable wall that stretched higher than the tallest tree, blotting out the sky. The air around it felt wrong, heavy with old magic and older warnings. "Turn back," the thorns seemed to whisper. "Beware what sleeps within." Malik bared his teeth in something that wasn't quite a smile. He hadn't spent 5 years hunting legends and piecing together forgotten lore just to be frightened away by a 100-year-old warning. The weapon he sought lay beyond those thorns, the power to unite the fractured werewolf kingdoms under his rule, the strength to end the endless wars that had plagued his people for generations. All he had to do was claim her. "The blood, my lord." Casimir's hand shook as he offered up a silver dagger, its edge gleaming with runes that hurt to look at. "The ritual requires alpha blood, freely given." Malik took the blade without hesitation. The memories came unbidden: another knife, another choice. His father's shocked face as royal blood spilled onto marble floors. The weight of a crown he'd won through patricide. They called him the Butcher now, and he'd earned that name through rivers of blood. What was one more drop? He sliced his palm open, barely feeling the sting. His blood, dark and rich with alpha power, dripped onto the ancient roots of the briar hedge. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the thorns began to scream. The sound was like metal tearing, like bones breaking, like the death cry of something that had guarded its secret for far too long. The massive wall of briars shuddered, then began to crumble. Thorns that had stood for a century turned to ash and drifted away on wind that tasted of magic and endings. "Forward," Malik commanded, and his army surged through the gap. The castle beyond was a tomb of white stone and silence. Malik's wolf senses screamed that something powerful waited within, something that made even his alpha dominance feel small and fragile. He smiled again, cold and sharp. Finally, after all these years of conquest, of building an empire on the bones of his enemies, of being called monster and butcher and tyrant, finally, he would have the power to make the world kneel. Or the world would burn. Either way, he would win. The chamber lay deep beneath the castle, downstairs carved from stone that predated memory. Malik descended with Casimir close behind, while Rowan and a handful of elite guards followed at a respectful distance. Torches flickered against walls covered in warning runes, ancient wolf script that spoke of danger and containment, and things best left sleeping. Malik ignored them all. The final door opened with a groan of rusted hinges. Beyond it, the chamber took his breath away. She lay upon an altar of black marble, surrounded by a circle of silver runes that pulsed with fading magic. Even in sleep, she was magnificent. Wild, dark hair spilled across the stone like a midnight river. Her face was fierce, even in repose. High cheekbones, full lips, and an expression that suggested she'd been fighting something even in her dreams. Princess Aurora Nightshade, Casimir whispered reverently, last of the Nightshade bloodline. The chronicles say she was 20 when the ritual went wrong. Malik moved closer, studying her with a conqueror's eye. She wore a gown of white silk that had somehow survived a century without decay, and around her throat gleamed a collar of diamonds that marked her royal status. But it was her scent that made his wolf stir with interest. Power and moonlight and something wild that called to the predator in his blood. This close, he could see the warning signs. Her fingers were tipped with claws that hadn't fully retracted. Silver light pulsed beneath her eyelids like lightning trapped behind skin. The air around her shimmered with barely contained energy. Not just a princess, Malik realized. A prison. The texts were clear, Casimir said, setting up his ritual components around the altar with shaking hands. She volunteered to be the vessel for a protective wolf deity. Her father's magicians corrupted the binding, turning protector into prisoner. The entity inside her is eldritch in nature, older than the kingdoms, powerful beyond measure. "Can you wake her?" Malik demanded. "Yes, but my lord, you must understand. The binding has weakened over time. When she wakes, the entity will be unstable, dangerous. You'll need to speak the words of temporary suppression the moment she rises, or do it." Casimir's hands moved in complex patterns, his voice rising in words that made reality shudder. The silver runes around Aurora's altar blazed to life, burning so bright Malik had to shield his eyes. Then her eyes opened, not amber like a normal wolf's, silver white, blazing with inhuman fury and a century of imprisoned rage. Aurora Nightshade rose from the altar like vengeance taking form, her mouth opening in a scream that shattered stone and sent Malik's warriors stumbling backward. The temperature in the chamber plummeted, shadows writhed around her like living things. "Free!" she rasped in a voice that held two tones, woman and ancient god, speaking as one. Finally free. Her gaze fixed on Malik, and he saw his death reflected in those terrible silver eyes. Then she lunged, claws extended, and the chamber exploded into violence. Aurora's body moved without conscious thought, driven by instincts that weren't entirely her own. "Danger!" the entity inside her screamed. "Threat! Destroy!" She barely registered the man before her, just another enemy, another jailer, another fool who thought he could control what lived in her skin. Her claws found his chest and tore, drawing blood that smelled like alpha power and ambition. He didn't die. Instead, he caught her wrists with impossible strength and twisted, using her momentum to slam her against the stone wall hard enough to crack it. Pain exploded through her shoulder, bright and clarifying. "Enough!" His voice carried the full weight of alpha command, but it wasn't enough to stop the entity. Aurora's body contorted, bones beginning to shift. The transformation wasn't like a normal wolf's. Her spine arched as power poured through her, eldritch and wrong and beautiful in its terrible glory. Silver light erupted from her skin. Her form grew larger, claws extending to unnatural lengths, muscles rippling with strength that could tear through armies. She was dimly aware of screaming, of warriors backing away in terror, of magic that tasted like old blood and broken promises. The man, the Alpha, held his ground. "Casimir, now!" he roared. Words of power filled the chamber, wrapping around Aurora like chains. The entity inside her shrieked in fury as the binding spell took hold, forcing it back, suppressing it beneath layers of ancient magic. Aurora felt her body collapsing back to human form, the uncontrolled power receding like a tide. When she came back to herself, she was naked and trembling on the cold stone floor, the Alpha's arms wrapped around her like iron bands. Blood, his blood, dripped onto her shoulder from claw marks she'd left across his chest. "Who?" Her voice cracked. A century of sleep had left her throat raw. "Who dares?" "I am Prince Malik," he said, and his voice held no warmth, no compassion, just cold certainty. "And you belong to me now." Aurora's mind reeled. The last thing she remembered was the ritual, the terrible moment when she realized the entity was corrupted, the desperate choice to seal herself away before she could destroy her pack. Now she was awake. The entity was still inside her, and this scarred Alpha was looking at her like she was a weapon he'd just claimed. "The seal," she gasped. "You broke the seal. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've claimed the most powerful being in the kingdoms," Malik replied. "And in 3 days, you will be my queen, my weapon, my bride." "I am no one's weapon." Aurora tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "You are exactly what I need you to be." His golden eyes bored into hers. "You will marry me. You will help me unite the kingdoms. And in return, I will ensure the entity inside you doesn't destroy everything you once loved." It wasn't a proposal. It was a sentence. Aurora looked up at him, at the cold, beautiful face of the man who'd just sentenced her to a new prison, and felt despair crash over her like a wave. A century of sleep, and she'd woken to a nightmare. 3 days passed in a blur of captivity and preparation. Aurora spent them in a tower room, guarded by warriors who looked at her with fear and fascination in equal measure. Casimir visited daily to reinforce the binding spell that kept the entity suppressed, just enough that she could maintain control, not enough that she could use the power to escape. She learned things in those days, learned that 100 years had passed while she slept, learned that her pack, her family, her entire kingdom had fallen to ruin and been forgotten, learned that the man who'd claimed her, Prince Malik, was called the Butcher of the South, a warlord who'd carved out an empire through blood and brutality. And now she was to be his queen. The wedding took place in Malik's great hall before every major alpha in the kingdoms. Aurora wore midnight velvet and diamonds that felt like chains, walking down an aisle lined with warriors who'd bent knee to her captor. Malik waited at the altar in formal armor of black and silver, looking every inch the conqueror king. When their eyes met, Aurora felt something unexpected, a pull, deep in her chest, that had nothing to do with the entity and everything to do with the mate bond beginning to form. No, she thought desperately, not him, anyone but him. But the bond didn't care about her wishes. "The vows," commanded the pack priest, a grizzled old wolf whose eyes held too much knowledge. Malik took her hand, and Aurora's breath caught at the jolt of connection. Through their touching skin, she felt echoes of his emotions. Ambition, yes, but also loneliness. A deep, aching isolation that mirrored her own century of solitude. "I claim you as my mate," Malik said, his voice carrying through the hall. "My queen, my pack." The words were a binding as powerful as any spell. Aurora felt them settle into her bones, felt the mate bond snap into place like a lock clicking shut. Her voice faltered. She couldn't say she claimed him willingly, couldn't lie before the gathered witnesses. Malik's eyes narrowed, a warning. Aurora drew herself up, refusing to cower. "I accept," she said instead. Not a claim, just acknowledgement of reality. The priest cut their palms, mingling their blood. Alpha and vessel, conqueror and captive. The moment their blood touched, the mate bond surged to full strength, and the entity inside Aurora went wild. She felt it rising like a tidal wave, crashing against Casimir's binding spell with fury born of 100 years of imprisonment. The bond had changed something, weakened the suppression just enough. Aurora's body convulsed. Silver light exploded from her skin as the partial shift took her. Her wolf surged forward, but it wasn't her wolf anymore. It was massive, wreathed in eldritch power and shadow, eyes blazing with inhuman fury. She lunged for Malik's throat. The mate bond screamed in protest, a lance of agony that drove through both of them. Aurora faltered, confused by the pain. In that moment of hesitation, Malik grabbed her, pulling her against his chest even as her claws scored his arms. "Aurora!" he commanded, and the sound of her name in his voice did what the binding spell couldn't. The mate bond surged again, and she felt his alpha strength flowing through it, anchoring her, giving her something to hold on to. The entity retreated. Aurora collapsed in his arms, gasping, her body reverting to human form. Around them, the assembled alphas stared in shocked silence at the display of power they'd just witnessed. "The ceremony is complete," Malik announced calmly, as if his new queen hadn't just tried to kill him in front of everyone. "Let the feast begin." He carried her from the hall, and Aurora was too exhausted to protest. Later, in his chambers, he laid her carefully on the massive bed and sat beside her, studying her face with an expression she couldn't read. "That was the entity?" he asked quietly. Aurora nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good." A slight smile curved his lips. "They needed to see your power, to understand what we are together." "We," Aurora thought bitterly, as if they were partners, as if she had any choice in this. But the mate bond pulsed between them, and she could feel his satisfaction mixed with something that might have been concern for her well-being. It terrified her how much she wanted to lean into that warmth. Morning came too soon. Aurora woke in Malik's chambers, her body aching from the previous night's transformation. She was alone. Malik had left before dawn, probably to tend to his empire, the empire she was now supposed to help him build. Aurora rose and dressed in the fine clothes that had been provided, trying not to think about how they fit perfectly, how Malik must have had them made while she slept in that tower. Planning. Always planning. A knock at the door. She opened it to find Malik himself, still wearing training leathers, sweat dampening his dark hair. He looked younger like this, less the cold warlord, and more the man she'd glimpsed through the mate bond. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. Aurora stepped back, letting him enter. He moved to the window, staring out at the training grounds below, where warriors sparred in the morning light. "The entity," he said quietly. "It nearly broke through yesterday. Casimir's binding won't hold forever." "I know." Aurora wrapped her arms around herself. "It's been fighting me for a century. I thought the sleep would weaken it, but it only made it more desperate." Malik turned to face her. "What if we could separate it from you, remove it without killing you both?" Aurora's heart stuttered. "Is that possible?" "Casimir believes so. With the right research, the right rituals." He paused. "I need you functional, Aurora. I need your power. Yes, but I need you in control of it. A weapon that turns on its wielder is worthless." The words stung, but Aurora pushed past the hurt. This was an opportunity, maybe her only chance. "Then help me," she said, moving closer. "Truly help me find a way to free myself from this curse. And in return, I'll help you unite the kingdoms, willingly. No more forcing me to comply." Malik studied her face, and through the bond she felt his consideration, calculation, the cold assessment of costs and benefits. Then, unexpectedly, agreement. "Very well," he said. "We have a bargain." Over the following weeks, they became something Aurora hadn't expected: partners. Malik's strategic brilliance combined with her devastating power proved unstoppable. Pack after pack bent the knee, seeing in them a force that couldn't be resisted. Aurora found herself almost enjoying it, almost believing they could be something more than captor and captive. Until the night she couldn't sleep, wandering Malik's private study while he was away at the war front. The letters were in a locked drawer, but Aurora's enhanced strength made short work of the lock. She told herself she was looking for books on ritual magic, for anything that might help free her from the entity. Instead, she found correspondence between Malik and Casimir. "The binding must be strengthened, not removed," Casimir had written. "Once you have full control of the entity through the completed ritual, you'll command power beyond any alpha in history. The vessel is irrelevant. It's the weapon within that matters." And Malik's response? Agreed. "Keep researching the transfer ritual. Aurora must never know our true intention." The pages slipped from Aurora's numb fingers. He'd lied. Every promise, every moment of seeming partnership. Lies. He didn't want to free her. He wanted to enslave her more completely, to take control of the entity and use it like a tool while she became nothing more than a living prison, trapped forever. The entity stirred at her fury, feeding on the betrayal burning through her chest. For once, Aurora didn't fight it. She ran. Out of the castle, into the night, letting the transformation take her. This time, when the massive wolf form erupted from her skin, wreathed in silver light and eldritch power, she welcomed it. Let the world see what they'd created. Let them all burn. Behind her, she heard Malik's howl of fury and alarm as he realized she was gone. Aurora didn't look back. The forest welcomed Aurora like a long-lost daughter. Her massive paws tore through undergrowth as she ran, silver light streaming from her fur like moonfire. The entity's consciousness bled into hers until she couldn't tell where Aurora ended and the ancient god began. For the first time in a century, they weren't fighting each other. They were running together. "Free!" the entity sang in her mind. Finally, finally free. Behind them, Aurora felt Malik through the mate bond. His fury, his desperation, the thundering of his own wolf form as he pursued. She pushed harder, drawing on the entity's power to leave him far behind. Dawn broke over the forest, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Aurora's control began to slip as exhaustion crept in. The entity, drunk on freedom after so long caged, started reaching for everything around them. A village appeared through the trees, small, human, utterly defenseless. "No," Aurora tried to say, but the word came out as a howl. The entity didn't want to kill. It wasn't evil, not truly, but it had been imprisoned for so long that freedom overwhelmed it. Too many sensations, too much space, too much everything pressing in at once. Fear made it lash out. Aurora watched in horror from within her own mind as her massive form tore through the village, not killing the people, thank the gods for that, but destroying their homes in a frenzy of confused terror. Wooden walls shattered under her claws. Thatched roofs went up in silver flame that burned cold instead of hot. People screamed and ran. Children cried. And Aurora was powerless to stop it. "Please," she begged the entity. "Please, these are innocents. They've done nothing wrong." The entity paused, confused by her distress. It had been a protector once, before the corruption. Some part of it still remembered. Slowly, painfully, Aurora clawed back control. Her wolf form stumbled, then collapsed in the center of the ruined village. She shifted back to human, her naked body covered in ash and debris, and curled into a ball as sobs tore from her throat. She'd destroyed their homes, terrified innocent people, become exactly what everyone feared, the monster that should have stayed sleeping. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty air. I'm so sorry. When dawn fully broke, Aurora forced herself to stand, to run again before the villagers returned with weapons and silver. She ran until her human legs gave out, until she collapsed in a clearing miles from anywhere, her back against an ancient oak. The entity had gone quiet in her mind, subdued by her grief. For the first time since waking, Aurora let herself truly feel the weight of everything she'd lost. Her pack, her family, a century of life. And now, even the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to be free. Malik had taken that hope and crushed it with his lies. Aurora closed her eyes and let the tears come, bitter and hot. She was so tired of being a weapon, so tired of being feared, so tired of fighting. Above her, the sun climbed higher, uncaring and cold. Malik tracked Aurora for 3 days through wilderness that seemed determined to slow him down. His wolf form was built for speed and endurance, but even he had limits. Every time he thought he was gaining ground, he'd find evidence that she'd drawn on the entity's power to put more distance between them. Trees scorched with that strange silver flame, the ground marked with massive paw prints that glowed faintly with eldritch energy. Rowan ran beside him, rust-colored fur matted with mud and rain. They'd left the army behind after the first day, taking only a handful of elite warriors who could match their pace. On the third night, they made camp in a cave to wait out a storm. Malik shifted back to human form, accepting the clothes and food Rowan offered without really tasting any of it. She destroyed a village, Rowan said quietly, warming his hands over their small fire. Tore through it like a hurricane. But she didn't kill anyone. Not a single death. What's your point? Malik's voice came out harsher than he intended. My point is that even out of control, even with that thing riding her, she's still trying not to hurt people. Rowan met his eyes. She's not the weapon you thought she was, Malik. She's a person, a good person trapped in an impossible situation. Malik stared into the flames, memories rising unbidden. His father's throne room. The choice that had haunted him for 10 years. Watch his people suffer under tyranny, or become the monster who killed his own father. He'd chosen monstrosity, embraced it, built an empire on the foundation of that single terrible act. They called him the Butcher because he was willing to do whatever it took to bring order to the chaos, to end the endless wars between packs, to create something stable and lasting, even if he had to wade through blood to get there. Aurora had made a different choice. When she became dangerous, she'd locked herself away, sacrificed a century of her life rather than risk hurting the people she loved. I need to recapture her, Malik said, but the words felt hollow even to him. Do you? Rowan asked. Or do you need to save her? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Malik thought about the mate bond, that constant presence at the back of his mind. Through it, he could feel Aurora's emotions even at this distance, her pain, her grief, her bone-deep exhaustion. She wasn't running anymore. She'd stopped, broken and alone, somewhere in the wilderness, waiting for him to find her. Waiting for him to finish what he'd started, to put her back in chains and complete his plan to control the entity. Except that wasn't what he wanted anymore. Gods help him. He wanted to see her smile, wanted to hear her laugh, wanted to know the woman beneath the power, the fierce spirit that had chosen imprisonment over becoming a killer. He wanted her, not the weapon she contained. When had that happened? When had Aurora Nightshade stopped being a tool to be used and become everything? She'll never trust me again, Malik said quietly. Not after what I did. Then you'll have to earn it back. Rowan's voice was gentle. You're good at conquering kingdoms, Malik. Maybe it's time to learn how to win a heart instead. Malik closed his eyes, feeling the mate bond pulse with Aurora's pain. For the first time in 10 years, he didn't know if he was strong enough for what came next. But he was going to try. Aurora heard him coming long before he arrived. The mate bond hummed with his approach, and her traitorous heart leapt despite everything. She'd found her way to the ruins of her ancestral home, the Nightshade Castle, now little more than crumbling stone and memories overgrown with vines. She sat in what had once been the great hall, moonlight streaming through gaps in the shattered roof. Around her, ghosts of the past whispered, her father's booming laugh, her mother's gentle songs, the sound of pack gatherings that filled these halls with warmth and life. All gone now. Dust and echoes. Malik entered through the broken doorway in human form, alone. He'd left his warriors behind. She could sense them keeping their distance, giving them privacy. Smart of him. Her control was fragile enough without an audience. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Aurora took in his appearance, clothing torn from days of pursuit, mud streaking his sharp features, golden eyes shadowed with something that might have been regret. Through the bond, she felt his emotions churning. Determination, yes, but also fear. Not of her. Fear of losing her. The realization shocked her into speaking first. "Did you come to drag me back in chains?" "No." His voice was rough, exhausted. "I came to listen." Aurora laughed bitterly. "Why would I tell you anything? You lied to me, used me, planned to enslave me more completely than any cage ever could." "I know." Malik moved closer slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "And I'm sorry. Sorrier than I've been for anything in a very long time." "Your apologies mean nothing." "Then let me offer the truth instead." He sat down on a fallen pillar across from her, close enough to talk but far enough not to crowd. "Tell me what really happened here, a century ago. Help me understand what I've been trying to control." Aurora studied his face, searching for deception. Found none, just genuine need to know, to understand. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the mate bond singing between them, urging her to bridge the distance. She started talking. "My father was Alpha Cornelius Nightshade, ruler of one of the oldest bloodlines in the kingdoms. When I was 19, a rival pack threatened to destroy us. We were outnumbered, outmatched. My father's magicians proposed a ritual: bind a protective wolf deity to a willing vessel, create a guardian that could defend our people." Malik listened without interrupting, his attention absolute. "I volunteered. I thought—" Aurora's voice cracked. "I thought I was being noble, brave, saving my pack. But my father's magicians were greedy. They altered the ritual without telling me, tried to imprison the deity instead of honoring it. The binding went wrong." She looked down at her hands, remembering that first terrible moment when she'd felt the entity's consciousness slam into hers, confused, betrayed, corrupted by the forced imprisonment. "It was supposed to be a partnership. Instead, I became a prison. The deity went mad from the betrayal, and I—" Aurora's throat tightened. "I could feel it fighting me. Knew that if I lost control, I'd destroy everything I loved, so I used forbidden sleep magic, locked us both away before we could hurt anyone." "That's why you didn't fight back," Malik said quietly. "When you could have." Aurora met his eyes. "I've never wanted to be a weapon. I just wanted to protect people. But all I've ever done is hurt them." "No," Malik's voice was fierce. "You saved them. You sacrificed everything to keep them safe. That's not a monster, Aurora. That's a hero." The words broke something open in her chest. Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and unexpected. No one had ever called her a hero before, not even her own pack. Malik crossed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. Aurora knew she should push him away, should hold on to her anger like armor. Instead, she buried her face in his chest and sobbed, for her lost century, for her destroyed home, for the impossible burden she carried. and Malik held her through it all, steady and strong, whispering apologies against her hair. Night deepened around them, and Aurora felt the entity stirring in her mind. It always got worse at night. The darkness called to it, reminded it of the century of imprisonment. She tensed in Malik's arms, preparing for the familiar battle for control. "Aurora?" Malik felt her change through their touching skin. "What's wrong?" "It's coming," she whispered. "The entity. I can't hold it back much longer." She expected him to pull away, to protect himself. Instead, he tightened his grip. "Then don't fight it alone." His voice was steady, certain. "Use the mate bond. Let me help you." "You can't." "I'm your mate, Aurora, your alpha. Let me carry some of this weight." The entity surged forward like a tidal wave. Aurora's back arched, a scream tearing from her throat as power flooded through her. Her body began to shift, bones cracking and reforming, silver light blazing from her skin. But Malik didn't let go. Through the mate bond, she felt his alpha strength flowing into her, not trying to control or suppress, but offering support. An anchor in the storm, something solid to hold on to while the entity raged. "You're not alone," his presence seemed to say. "I'm here. I won't let you fall." Hours passed in agony. The entity fought for freedom, for release, for anything except returning to its cage. Aurora fought just as hard to maintain herself, to not lose her identity in the overwhelming power, and Malik held them both together. As the darkest part of night approached, something shifted. The entity, exhausted from fighting, began to calm. Aurora felt it recognizing Malik through their connection, felt it understanding that he wasn't trying to imprison it, just help Aurora contain it. Slowly, painfully, the transformation reversed. Aurora collapsed back to human form in Malik's arms, gasping and shaking. "You're still here," she whispered in wonder. "You didn't run." "Never." Malik's hand cupped her face, tilting it up so their eyes met. "I told you I was sorry. I meant it. I don't want to control the entity, Aurora. I don't want you as a weapon. I want you. Just you." Something fierce and desperate rose in Aurora's chest. The mate bond thrummed between them, no longer feeling like a chain, but like a lifeline, a choice she could make freely. "Malik." Her voice was barely a breath. He understood. His lips found hers in a kiss that tasted like redemption and new beginnings. Aurora kissed him back with everything she had, all her loneliness, all her hope, all her desperate need for connection after a century alone. The mate bond blazed to life, stronger than ever. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Malik rested his forehead against hers. "I claim you," he said, and this time the words weren't a command. They were a plea. "Not as my weapon, as my mate, my equal, my partner in all things." Aurora's heart soared. "I claim you too, my alpha, my mate, my choice." They sealed the bond the ancient way, blood and bite and vow spoken under the stars. And when it was done, Aurora felt complete for the first time in her life. She wasn't alone anymore. They would face the entity together, build a future together, rule together. For the first time in a century, Aurora dared to hope. Morning came too soon. Aurora woke wrapped in Malik's arms, his steady breathing a comfort she'd never expected to have. The ruins around them felt less haunted now, more like a place of new beginnings than old endings. Then she heard it, the sound of many wolves approaching. Too many. Malik tensed beside her, already awake. "We have company." They dressed quickly, Aurora pulling on the spare clothes Malik had brought. Through the mate bond, she felt his warriors rushing back toward the ruins, but they were too far away to help. Lord Theron Greystone entered the clearing first, a massive silver-gray wolf who shifted to human form with practiced ease. He wore the formal robes of the Northern Territories, and behind him, Dozens of alphas materialized from the forest, a coalition of every pack that feared what Malik and Aurora represented. Prince Malik, Princess Aurora. Theron's voice was grave, sad even. I wish we could have met under better circumstances. Malik moved in front of Aurora, protective. What do you want, Greystone? The same thing we've always wanted. Peace, stability. Theron's amber eyes fixed on Aurora, and that cannot exist while she lives. Aurora felt the entity stir at the threat. She pushed it down with effort. I've hurt no one, killed no one. Not yet. Theron pulled a scroll from his robes, ancient and crumbling. But you will. We found texts from your father's library, records of the ritual that created you. The entity inside you is a wolf deity, yes, but one that was meant to be a temporary guardian, not a permanent resident. It's been corrupted by a century of imprisonment. Every day it remains inside you, it grows more unstable. Then help us separate them, Malik demanded. You have the texts. Help us find a way. We've done better than that. Theron's expression held genuine regret. We've found the reversal ritual. But Princess Aurora, you need to understand. The reversal will kill both you and the entity. There's no other way. The words hit Aurora like a physical blow. You're asking me to die. I'm offering you mercy. Theron stepped closer. A clean death, painless, that removes the threat forever. It's more than most monsters receive. She's not a monster! Malik's alpha power flooded the clearing, making lesser wolves whimper and bow their heads. Then prove it. Theron didn't flinch. Let her choose. Death with dignity, or a life of watching herself destroy everything she touches. Battle erupted around them before Aurora could answer. Malik's warriors arrived, crashing into the coalition forces with savage fury. Silver blades flashed in the morning light. The coalition had come prepared for werewolves, armed with weapons that could kill what normal steel couldn't. Malik fought like a demon, protecting Aurora while trying to reach Theron. But the coalition had numbers and surprise on their side. Aurora saw it happening in slow motion. A warrior with a silver blade moving behind Malik while he fought two others. She screamed a warning, but it was too late. The blade punched through Malik's back, emerging from his chest in a spray of crimson. No! Aurora's scream tore through the clearing. The entity exploded forward, no longer contained. Her massive wolf form erupted in silver light and fury, decimating the coalition forces in seconds. But it was mercy that stayed her claws. She didn't kill, just scattered them, drove them back. When she shifted back to human form, Malik lay in a pool of his own blood, the silver poison already spreading through his veins. Aurora dropped to her knees beside him, her hands glowing as she tried desperately to heal the wound. But silver fought her power, resisted her magic. Please, she begged, please don't leave me. Not now, not when I finally found you. Theron appeared beside her, wounded but alive. Let me help him. Let my healers use the ancient remedies that can fight silver poisoning. Why would you help him? Because I'm not a monster either. Theron's eyes were kind. Let me save him, Aurora. All I ask in return is that you accept the ritual, end the threat, give your mate a chance to live without the shadow of what you might become. Aurora looked down at Malik's pale face, felt his life slipping away through the mate bond. She'd spent a century in a cage to protect others. What was death compared to that? Yes, she whispered. Save him. I'll do the ritual. Through the bond, she felt Malik stirring, his consciousness fighting its way back, felt his desperate rejection of her choice. But it was too late. Theron's warriors were already moving forward with silver chains, and Aurora let them take her. One last sacrifice, one last choice to protect instead of destroy. She met Malik's golden eyes as his healers began their work, trying to memorize his face. Then they dragged her away, and all she could feel was his anguish echoing through the mate bond. "I'm sorry," she thought, hoping he could hear her. "I love you." Aurora knelt in the blood-soaked grass, cradling Malik's broken body while Theron's healers rushed forward with their herbs and potions. The silver poison was spreading fast. She could see it creeping through his veins like black ice, could feel through the mate bond how his body fought and failed to heal the wound. His breathing was shallow, labored. Each breath might be his last. "Please," she whispered, pressing her glowing hands against the wound even though she knew it was useless. Silver resisted her power, turned her healing magic back on itself. "Don't leave me. Not like this." Malik's eyes fluttered open, unfocused with pain. When he saw the silver chains Theron's warriors were bringing toward Aurora, understanding dawned in his golden gaze. "No," his voice was barely a rasp. "Aurora, don't—" "Shh." She leaned down, pressing her forehead to his. Through the mate bond, she poured everything she couldn't say into him, her love, her gratitude, her desperate need for him to survive. "It's okay. You're going to be okay." "Not without you." His hand found hers, gripping with surprising strength. "Don't do this. We'll find another way." "There is no other way." Aurora's tears fell onto his face, mixing with blood. "I've been running from this for 100 years, Malik. Maybe it's time to stop." The healers were working now, pouring antidotes down his throat, pressing poultices against the wound. Ancient remedies that might counteract the silver if they worked fast enough. Theron knelt beside them, his expression grave but kind. "Princess Aurora, the ritual site is prepared. The stone circle where the entity was first bound to you. We'll begin at dawn." Dawn. Less than an hour away. "1 hour," Aurora said, her voice breaking. "Give me 1 hour with him, please." Theron looked at Malik's ashen face, at the desperate love clear in Aurora's eyes, and nodded. 1 hour, but no tricks. The silver chains stay on you." The chains snapped around her wrists, burning her skin. Aurora barely felt it. All her attention was on Malik as Theron's warriors lifted him gently onto a stretcher, carrying him to the healer's tent. She walked beside him, chains dragging, refusing to let go of his hand. In the tent, Aurora sat beside Malik while the healers worked. She could feel the silver poison fighting their remedies, could feel Malik's life hanging by a thread. But slowly, so slowly, the black veins began to recede. His breathing steadied. The wound started to close, though nowhere near as fast as a normal werewolf's healing. "You're going to make it," Aurora whispered, relief flooding through her. "You're going to live." "Aurora!" Malik's voice was stronger now, desperate. "Don't do the ritual. I'm ordering you as your alpha." "You're not my alpha." She smiled through her tears. "You're my mate, my equal, and this is my choice to make." "Then choose to live." He tried to sit up, but his body betrayed him, too weak from blood loss and poison. "Choose us. Choose our future." "I am choosing us." Aurora leaned down, kissing him softly. "I'm choosing to give you a future without fear, without watching me become the monster I was always afraid of being." Through the mate bond, she felt his anguish, his rage at his own weakness, his inability to protect her. "I love you," she said against his lips. "Remember that. Whatever happens, remember that I love you." Outside, the first rays of dawn touched the sky. Theron appeared in the tent entrance. "It's time." Aurora stood, the chains heavy on her wrists. She looked back at Malik one last time, memorizing his face. The sharp angles, the golden eyes blazing with helpless fury, the strength that had anchored her through the darkness. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered. Then she turned and walked toward her death. Behind her, Malik's roar of denial shook the tent, but he was too weak to rise, too wounded to follow. All he could do was watch through the mate bond as Aurora walked away. The cell beneath Theron's fortress was cold and dark, lit only by a single torch that cast dancing shadows on stone walls. Aurora sat on the bare floor, silver chains binding her wrists and ankles. The metal burned constantly, suppressing her power, keeping the entity caged. Around her, priestesses moved in ritual patterns, chanting prayers of purification and binding. They were preparing her for death. "Drink this," one priestess said, offering a cup of bitter liquid. "It will calm your spirit for the passage." Aurora drank obediently. She'd made her choice. Fighting now would only make it harder. The entity stirred in her mind, sensing what was coming. Why? Its voice was ancient, weary. Why accept this? "Because you deserve to be free," Aurora thought back. "We both do. This curse has held us both prisoner for too long. But we will die." "I know." Aurora closed her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry my father's magicians twisted you, imprisoned you, turned you into something you were never meant to be. You should have been a protector, honored and partnered. Instead, you became a cage, and I became your jailer." Silence in her mind. Then quietly, "You were never cruel to me. Even when I fought you, even when I tried to destroy, you showed me compassion. No one else ever did that." Tears slipped down Aurora's cheeks. "You were scared, betrayed. Anyone would have fought back." Tell me what happens next. So, Aurora told the entity about the ritual, about the reversal that would tear them apart and end them both. And as she spoke, memories rose unbidden. The original ritual 100 years ago. She'd been so young, so foolish, standing in the stone circle surrounded by her father's magicians, believing she was saving her pack. The moment the entity slammed into her consciousness, she'd felt its terror and confusion, felt the binding chains wrapping around it. "Partnership," it had screamed. "You promised partnership." But the magician's greed had corrupted everything. They'd tried to enslave a god, and the god had gone mad from the betrayal. "I should have stopped them," Aurora whispered. "When I felt what they were doing, I should have ended the ritual, freed you before the binding completed." "You tried. I remember. You fought the magicians, tried to break the circle. They were too strong. I failed you. You saved me from worse." The entity's presence wrapped around her consciousness like a comforting blanket. "Without your compassion, without your company these 100 years, I would have gone completely mad. You gave me something to hold on to, someone who saw me as more than a weapon or a threat." Aurora's throat tightened. "We could have been magnificent together, if the ritual had worked right, if they'd honored you instead of imprisoning you." "We were magnificent anyway," the entity said softly. "Two souls sharing one skin, learning to dance together in the darkness. I am grateful for that, Aurora Nightshade. For you. I'm grateful for you, too." They sat together in the darkness, woman and god, prisoner and prison, united in their final hours. Outside, Aurora could feel Malik through the mate bond. He was healing, getting stronger with every passing minute. His rage burned bright enough to warm her even at this distance. He was planning something. She could feel it. Desperation and determination pouring through their connection. "Don't," she whispered, hoping he could hear her across the distance. "Please, Malik, let me go. Save yourself." But she knew he wouldn't listen. A priestess entered the cell. "It's time, princess. The stone circle awaits." Aurora stood on shaking legs, the chains dragging. As they led her up from the dungeons toward the ritual site, she felt the entity gathering itself in her mind. "If we must die," it said, "then we die together, as we lived, as partners." "As friends," Aurora agreed. And together, they walked toward the dawn. Malik woke to find Rowan standing over him, offering a hand. "We need to move," his beta said quietly. "Now." The silver poison was gone, purged by Theron's ancient remedies. Malik's wound had closed, though the scar would remain, a reminder of how close death had come. But he was alive, stronger with every passing second as his alpha healing kicked back into full force. And Aurora was being led to her execution. Through the mate bond, he felt her acceptance, her terrible, resigned peace. She'd given up fighting, surrendered to what she saw as inevitable. Malik refused to accept it. "How many warriors do we have?" He pulled on the armor Rowan had brought, ignoring the protests from healers who thought he should rest. 15 who made it through the battle, against Theron's full force of over 200. Rowan's expression was grim. "Malik, even for you, these odds." "I don't care about the odds." Malik's voice was cold fury given shape. "I'm getting her back. Then we do this smart." Rowan pulled out a map of Theron's fortress, marked with guard positions. "The ritual site is the ancient stone circle, half a mile from the fortress. They'll have it heavily guarded, but most of Theron's forces are still recovering from the battle. If we hit hard and fast, we hit now." Malik studied the map, his strategic mind already calculating angles of attack, weak points, the fastest route to Aurora. "Divide our forces, 10 with you to create a diversion at the main gate, 5 with me, moving through the forest to the stone circle." "And if we fail?" "We don't fail." Malik met his beta's eyes. "I didn't kill my father, build an empire, and claim the most powerful mate in the kingdoms just to lose her to some self-righteous coalition. Aurora is mine, and I protect what's mine." They moved out under cover of the pre-dawn darkness. Malik's small strike force consisted of his most elite warriors, wolves who'd been with him since the beginning, who trusted him enough to charge into impossible odds. Through the mate bond, Malik felt Aurora being led to the stone circle, felt the priests beginning their preparations, felt the entity stirring in her mind, saying goodbye. "Hold on," he thought desperately, pouring every ounce of his will through the bond. "I'm coming. Just hold on." He felt her surprise, her fear, not for herself, but for him. "No," her thoughts whispered back. "Malik, please. You'll get yourself killed." "Then I'll die trying," he sent back, "because a world without you isn't worth living in." The attack began with Rowan's diversion. Explosions rocked the fortress's main gate as his warriors set fire to the guard towers. Alarm bells rang. Warriors poured toward the disturbance. Malik's strike force moved like shadows through the forest, avoiding the confused guards, racing toward the stone circle where dawn was breaking. They burst into the clearing to find Aurora already bound at the circle's center, surrounded by chanting priests. Theron stood nearby, his expression sad but resolved. Dozens of coalition warriors formed a protective ring around the ritual site. "Stop!" Malik roared, his alpha power flooding the space. The warriors hesitated. Theron raised a hand. "Stand down! Let him through!" Malik pushed through the crowd, his warriors forming a defensive line behind him. When he reached Aurora, the sight of her stole his breath. She was wrapped in white burial cloth, silver chains crisscrossing her body, keeping her arms bound to the stone altar. Her face was pale but composed, eyes shining with unshed tears. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "Did you really think I'd let you do this alone?" Malik turned to face Theron. "Release her, now!" "I can't do that." Theron's voice held genuine regret. "The ritual must proceed, for the safety of every pack in the kingdoms." "Then you'll have to go through me." "Malik, please," Aurora started. The first word of the ritual cut her off. The priests began to chant, their voices rising in ancient harmonies that made reality shudder. Magic began to gather around Aurora, building toward the moment when it would tear her soul apart. Malik drew his sword, ready to fight every warrior in the clearing if that's what it took. Then Aurora screamed. The ritual had begun. Pain like nothing Aurora had ever known tore through her body. The ritual magic wrapped around her soul, seeking the join between her consciousness and the entities, trying to rip them apart. It felt like being split in half from the inside out, like having her very essence shredded and burned. The entities screamed with her, their voices blending into one agonized cry. Malik lunged toward her, but Theron's warriors caught him, holding him back even as he fought like a demon to reach her. "Aurora!" His voice cut through her pain. "Fight it. Don't let them do this." But she couldn't fight. The ritual was too strong, too deeply rooted in the original binding. The magic tore at the connection between her and the entity, searching for the boundary where one ended and the other began. Except there was no boundary anymore. After a century together, consciousness woven into consciousness, two spirits sharing every thought and fear and dream, they weren't separate beings that could be pulled apart. They were one. The ritual magic found nothing to separate. No clean line between vessel and deity. Just a single, unified soul that had grown together like two trees, with roots so tangled they could never be pulled apart without destroying both. The magic recoiled, confused. Then it did the only thing it could. It began to burn away the corruption instead. Aurora felt it like fire in her veins. Not the cold silver flame of eldritch power, but something purer, hotter. The ritual had been designed to remove a foreign entity, but when it found them merged beyond separation, it adapted. It started destroying everything that didn't belong. The twisted magic from her father's botched binding, the corruption that had driven the entity mad, the eldritch wrongness that had turned a protector into a prison. A century of darkness burned away in moments. The entity screamed, but not in pain, in release, in recognition of what was happening. "It's purifying us," it gasped in her mind, "not separating, cleansing." Aurora felt it too. The constant pressure of fighting for control, the fear of losing herself, all of it melting away under the ritual's heat. The entity's consciousness remained, but the madness that had corrupted it was being seared away, layer by layer. Through the mate bond, she felt Malik's alpha power suddenly surge. He broke free from the warriors holding him and threw himself across the ritual boundary, his blood mixing with hers where the chains had cut her wrists. The moment their blood touched, something clicked into place. The mate bond wasn't just emotional, it was magic, ancient and powerful, and Malik's alpha blood carried power of its own. His presence in the ritual circle changed the magic's nature, gave Aurora something to anchor to while the purification raged through her. She felt his strength flowing into her, his absolute certainty that she would survive this, his love, fierce and unwavering, burning bright enough to light her way through the darkness. The entity reached for that love too, recognizing in Malik what it had always been meant to be, a partner, not a prison guard. Someone who offered strength freely instead of trying to take control. The last of the corruption burned away. Light exploded from Aurora's body, not the cold silver of eldritch power, but something warm, golden, divine. When it faded, Aurora lay gasping in the center of the stone circle, the chains fallen away to ash. Malik knelt beside her, his hands gentle as he helped her sit up. "Aurora?" His voice shook. "Are you—" She looked up at him, and he froze. Her eyes had changed, no longer amber or the terrible silver white of the entity's possession. Now they were both colors blended together, amber shot through with threads of silver, ancient and powerful, but no longer wrong. "I'm here," she whispered. "We're both here, together." Around them, the assembled wolves stared in shocked silence at what the ritual had wrought. Aurora stood in the center of the stone circle, and the world held its breath. She could feel the entity, no, not the entity anymore, the deity, the wolf god that had been meant to protect, now finally restored to its true nature. It wasn't separate from her. It was her, woven so deeply into her soul that they'd become a single being. But now the madness was gone. The corruption burned away. What remained was power and purpose, clear and bright. Theron took a step forward, his expression caught between awe and fear. "What are you?" "I am Aurora Nightshade." Her voice carried harmonics that hadn't been there before. Mortal woman and ancient deity speaking as one. "And I am what your ritual made me, not separated, purified." She looked down at her hands, watching silver gold light dance across her skin. The power that had always fought her now flowed through her like water, natural and right. She could feel the land around her, every tree, every blade of grass, every living thing for miles, all connected to her through the deity's blessing. Malik stood beside her, blood still dripping from where he'd torn free of his captors to join the ritual. Through the mate bond, Aurora felt his wonder, his relief, and underneath it all, his absolute certainty that she was still her, still the woman he'd claimed as his mate. "Your Majesty," Theron knelt slowly, his head bowed. "I was wrong. Forgive me." Aurora stepped toward him, and he flinched slightly. But instead of anger, she felt only compassion. He'd been trying to protect his people, acting from fear of something he didn't understand. She placed her hand on his head, and power flowed through her. Not destructive, but healing. The wounds from the battle closed, old scars faded. Theron gasped as decades of accumulated pain and weariness lifted from his shoulders. "You sought to protect the innocent," Aurora said gently. "That's not something that requires forgiveness, but you were wrong about what I am." She looked around at the assembled alphas, all frozen in shock. "I am not a threat. I am what I was always meant to be, a protector." One by one, the coalition alphas began to kneel. Some from fear, yes, but others from recognition of what stood before them. Not a monster to be destroyed, but a queen worthy of respect. Aurora turned to Malik, who remained standing, golden eyes blazing with pride. "You came for me," she said softly, "always." His voice was rough with emotion. "I told you, a world without you isn't worth living in." Aurora reached for him, and when their hands touched, the mate bond sang with joy. She could feel the silver wound across his chest, the scar that would mark him forever. With a thought, she healed it. The scar faded until only a faint line remained, a reminder of what he'd risked, what he'd been willing to sacrifice. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me, for fighting the ritual, your blood, your presence. It changed everything." Malik pulled her close, uncaring of their audience. "We changed everything. Together." Aurora felt the truth of it. The ritual hadn't just purified the deity. It had cemented their bond in ways beyond what any normal mating could achieve. They were connected now on levels most mates never reached, his strength and her power flowing between them, two halves of a perfect whole. She turned back to the assembled wolves, drawing herself up to her full height. Power radiated from her like sunlight, warm and welcoming instead of cold and terrifying. "I offer you all a choice," she announced, her voice carrying to every ear. "Join us in building a new kingdom, one where power is used to protect, not dominate, where strength and compassion can coexist, or refuse and go your separate ways. But know this, I will not be caged again, not by fear, not by tradition, not by anyone." Theron rose to his feet, his decision made. "I pledge my pact to your service, Queen Aurora, and to Prince Malik. Together, you represent everything our people need, strength tempered by wisdom, power balanced by compassion." Other alphas murmured agreement, rising from their knees to bow formally instead, not in submission, but in respect. Aurora felt Malik's hand find hers, their fingers interlacing. Through the mate bond, she felt his satisfaction, his pride, his love. Then let us begin, Aurora said, silver gold eyes shining in the dawn light. Let us build something worth fighting for, something worth protecting. The sun rose fully over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and silver. A new day, a new beginning, together. 3 days after the ritual, Aurora and Malik stood before the assembled alphas in Theron's great hall. The formal gathering had been called to establish the terms of the new United Kingdom. Alphas from every territory crowded the massive room, their eyes fixed on the couple at the front. Some looked hopeful, others wary. All of them carried a healthy dose of fear for what Aurora had become. Malik could feel the weight of their stares, their expectations. They expected him to take control, to be the dominant force as he'd always been, the butcher who ruled through strength and fear. Instead, he did something that shocked every wolf in the room. He knelt before Aurora. The gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Rowan's eyes went wide. Even Theron looked startled. "Prince Malik," someone began. "No." Malik's voice carried absolute certainty. "Not Prince. Not anymore." He looked up at Aurora, his golden eyes blazing with fierce pride and love. "I kneel before my queen, my mate, my equal in all things." Aurora's breath caught. Through the mate bond, she felt the sincerity of his gesture. This wasn't submission or weakness. This was choice. The same free choice she'd made when she claimed him in the ruins. "I offer you my loyalty," Malik continued, his voice filling the hall. "My strength, my strategic mind, everything I am and everything I have built. Not because you're stronger than me, not because you command a god's power." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But because you're the woman I love, and you're worthy of a crown I could never properly wear alone." Tears burned Aurora's eyes. She reached down, taking his hands and pulling him to his feet. "And I accept," she said clearly, "not your submission, but your partnership. You're not my subject, Malik. You're my mate, my general, my king consort." She turned to face the assembled alphas. "We will rule together. His tactical brilliance combined with my power, his strength tempered by my mercy. Two halves of a whole, bound by choice rather than conquest." She felt the rightness of it singing through the mate bond. This was what they were always meant to be, not captor and captive, not weapon and wielder, but partners who chose each other freely. "Those of you who join us," Aurora continued, "will find fair rule and protection. We won't conquer your territories, we'll unite them. Your alphas will keep their positions, your traditions will be honored, your people will be safe." She let power flare in her eyes. "But make no mistake, this isn't a request. The age of endless war between packs ends now." Theron stood, his face thoughtful. "You're proposing a federation, united defense and shared laws, but individual territories maintain their sovereignty?" "Exactly." Malik's strategic mind was already working. Pack leaders become regional governors. Major decisions go through a council of alphas with Aurora and me at its head. Trade opens between territories. Resources are shared during hardship. "And those who refuse?" An alpha from the Western Territories asked nervously. Aurora's smile held steel beneath the kindness. "I hope it won't come to that, but I will defend the weak from the strong, the innocent from the cruel. Anyone who threatens the peace we're building will answer to me personally." The threat wasn't empty. Every wolf in the room had heard about what happened at the stone circle, had seen the healed warriors, felt the weight of her purified divine power. One by one, the alphas began to kneel, not in fear this time, but in genuine acceptance of what Aurora and Malik offered: stability, protection, an end to generations of conflict. When the last alpha had pledged loyalty, Aurora took Malik's hand. Through the bond, she felt his satisfaction, his relief, his overwhelming love. "We did it," she thought. No, he corrected through the bond. You did it. I'm just fortunate enough to stand beside you. Aurora squeezed his hand. Together, always together. Outside the great hall, the sun set on the old world of endless pack wars, and dawn would rise on something new. The months that followed tested Aurora and Malik in ways battle never could. They traveled from territory to territory, meeting with pack leaders and establishing the new order. Aurora quickly learned that ruling required more than power. It required patience, diplomacy, and an understanding of pack politics that made warfare seem simple. Today, they stood in the Western Territories, surveying land that had been devastated by a decade of drought. The pack's alpha, Lady Senna, was a fierce she-wolf in her 50s who'd ruled alone after her mate's death. She'd been one of the last to accept the new kingdom, suspicious of any authority that might threaten her pack's independence. The river dried up 5 years ago, Senna explained, gesturing to the cracked earth that had once been fertile farmland. We've survived on rain alone, but it's not enough. Our hunters range farther every season, crossing into other territories just to find game. Aurora walked to the center of the dead riverbed, feeling the earth beneath her feet. The purified deity's power stirred, responding to the land's distress. May I? She asked Senna. The alpha nodded warily. If you truly can help? Aurora knelt and pressed her palms to the dry earth. Silver light flowed from her hands, spreading outward in ripples. The divine power that had once only destroyed now reached deep into the ground, finding the water table that drought had pushed beyond normal reach. Blessed, coaxed, called. Water began to bubble up through the cracked earth. First a trickle, then a stream, then a flowing river that followed its old course with renewed strength. The watching pack members gasped as the dead riverbed came back to life. Aurora stood, swaying slightly from the effort. Malik was there immediately, his hand steadying her. Easy, he murmured. Don't push yourself too hard. I'm fine. Aurora smiled at him, then turned to Senna. The water table was there, just deeper than before. I've blessed it to stay strong even during drought. Your river should flow reliably now. Senna stared at the water, then dropped to her knees. Your Majesty, I never believed the stories, thought they were exaggerations. Tears streaked her weathered face. But you've given us back our lives. That's what a queen does, Aurora said gently, helping her up. Protects her people. All of them, not just those in the capital. Word of Aurora's blessings spread quickly. Other territories began sending requests. Lands poisoned by old battles, forests dying from disease, hunting grounds depleted by overharvesting. Aurora visited as many as she could, using her divine power to heal the scars left by generations of warfare. But Malik noticed the toll it took. Each blessing drained her, left her exhausted for days afterward. And there were whispers among the traditionalist alphas, questioning whether a queen should have such power, whether it was natural or right for one wolf to command divine forces. Let them whisper, Aurora said one evening as they made camp between territories. I'm not doing this for their approval. I'm doing it because it's right. I know. Malik pulled her close, feeling her exhaustion through the bond. But you can't save everyone, Aurora. You're not invincible. I have to try. Her amber-silver eyes met his. I was given this power for a reason. If I don't use it to help people, then what was the point of everything we went through? Malik understood. He'd built an empire trying to create peace through force. Aurora was building the same peace through compassion. Both approaches had their place. Then we do it together, he said. I'll handle the politics and military strategy. You handle the blessings and healing. And we'll both handle anyone who thinks they can challenge our authority. Aurora laughed, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Spoken like a true butcher. Former butcher, he corrected. Now I'm just the queen's devoted mate. Liar. She kissed him softly. You'll always be a warrior, but now you fight for building instead of destroying. Through the mate bond, Malik felt her pride in him, her love. It humbled him more than any battlefield victory ever had. Outside their tent, Rowan stood guard while their united kingdom slowly, painfully, beautifully began to take shape. The attack came during the harvest celebration. Aurora and Malik had gathered the major alphas at the capital for a festival meant to celebrate the first successful harvest under the new kingdom's protection. Packs that had been enemies for generations mingled in the great courtyard, sharing food and stories under the autumn moon. It should have been perfect, a symbol of everything they'd built. Instead, it became a battlefield. Lord Fenris Blackclaw struck without warning, leading a force of traditionalist warriors who'd hidden among the celebrating crowds. Silver weapons flashed in the torchlight as they attacked, targeting Aurora first. "Death to the false queen!" Fenris roared, his massive form already shifting to his charcoal wolf. "Death to the corruption that calls itself divine!" Aurora reacted on instinct, her divine power flaring as she protected the innocent pack members caught in the crossfire. Silver light formed a shimmering barrier around the civilians, deflecting the silver blades that would have cut them down. Malik was already moving, his sword singing as he engaged Fenris's warriors. Through the mate bond, Aurora felt his cold fury. Fenris had been his general once, a trusted subordinate. This betrayal cut deeper than any blade. "Stand down, Fenris," Malik commanded, his alpha power rolling through the courtyard. "This rebellion ends now." "Never!" Fenris's wolf form lunged at him. "You've been corrupted by her witchcraft. The butcher I followed would never bow to anyone, especially not a woman wielding stolen divine power." Their clash shook the ground. Two powerful alphas, former allies, now locked in deadly combat. Aurora wanted to help, but she couldn't drop the protective barrier without exposing civilians to the silver weapons. She watched in horror as more of Fenris's rebels emerged from hiding, their numbers far greater than anyone had suspected. Then Rowan was there, leading their loyal warriors in a counterattack. Theron's northern pack joined the defense, along with Senna's western wolves and dozens of others who'd sworn loyalty to their queen. The battle raged through the courtyard, silver against steel, wolf against wolf. Aurora maintained her barrier even as exhaustion pulled at her, refusing to let innocents die for someone else's ideology. Fenris and Malik fought like demons, neither giving ground. The old general was skilled, experienced, and fighting with the fury of true belief. But Malik had something Fenris didn't: absolute certainty in his cause. "You taught me that strength serves the pack," Malik growled as their blades clashed. "That an alpha's duty is protection, not domination. Or was that all lies?" "I taught you that weakness destroys," Fenris snarled. "And you've become weak, letting a woman rule you." "She doesn't rule me." Malik's blade found an opening, scoring a deep cut across Fenris's shoulder. "We rule together, partners, equals, something you'll never understand." The battle reached its peak when one of Fenris's warriors broke through the defenders, heading straight for Aurora with a silver blade raised. She couldn't drop the barrier to defend herself without killing the civilians she was protecting. Malik saw it happening, felt Aurora's flash of fear through the bond. He abandoned his fight with Fenris and threw himself between Aurora and the attacker, taking the silver blade meant for her heart. The weapon punched through his shoulder, and he grunted in pain, but didn't fall. "No one touches my mate," he snarled, and finished the attacker with a single brutal strike. Aurora's control finally snapped. She dropped the protective barrier and unleashed her full divine power. Silver light exploded outward, not destructively, but with overwhelming force. The purified deity's power washed over the battlefield, and Aurora's voice rang out with divine authority. "Enough!" Every wolf froze, held in place by the weight of her power. Not hurting them, just stopping them, giving everyone a chance to see what they'd become, what this violence had created. "Look around you," Aurora commanded, her eyes blazing silver. "See what your hatred has done. Wolves who should be celebrating together, locked in battle. Innocents traumatized. Blood spilling on ground we worked so hard to heal." She focused on Fenris, held immobile by her power. "Is this the strength you claim to fight for? Destroying the peace we've built?" Fenris's eyes burned with defiant hate, but he couldn't speak, couldn't move. Aurora released him from the hold. "I could kill you, all of you who raised weapons against innocents tonight. The power is mine to use." She let them see the truth of that in her eyes. "But I won't, because mercy is stronger than vengeance, and I will not become the monster you claim I am." She turned to her loyal alphas. "Imprison the rebels. They'll face trial and judgment under our new laws, not execution in the heat of battle." As Fenris was dragged away, still spitting curses, Aurora finally allowed herself to collapse. Malik caught her, his wounded shoulder forgotten. "You're bleeding," she whispered, her hands already glowing to heal him. "You're exhausted," he countered, but let her heal the silver wound before it could poison him. They held each other in the ruins of what should have been a celebration, knowing that building peace would always be harder than waging war. But they'd do it anyway, together. 3 months after Fenris's rebellion, Aurora woke to find the world spinning. She barely made it to the chamber pot before her stomach rebelled, emptying itself violently. Malik was there instantly, holding her hair back and supporting her with gentle hands. "That's the 3rd morning in a row," he said quietly, concern bleeding through the mate bond. "Aurora, we need to call the healers." "I already know what they'll say." Aurora wiped her mouth, a wondering smile crossing her face despite the nausea. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Malik's eyes went wide, his hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "How is that possible?" he breathed. "You spent a century in stasis. The healers said—" "They said I was barren." Aurora covered his hand with hers. "But they didn't account for divine intervention. The deity's power didn't just purify me, Malik. It made me whole, healed damage that was never supposed to heal." Through the mate bond, she felt his overwhelming joy crashing over her like a tidal wave. Malik pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "We're going to have a child," he whispered against her hair. "Gods above, Aurora, a child." The royal healers confirmed it that afternoon. Not just a child, twins, a son and a daughter, both already showing signs of their unique heritage. The old healer, the same one who'd saved Malik from silver poisoning, examined Aurora with wonder in her eyes. "They carry the divine blessing," she said softly. "I can feel it. Not imprisoned like you were, Your Majesty, but integrated from the start. They'll be born with the deity's protection, but not its burden." Aurora pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling the tiny sparks of life growing within her. Her children, hers and Malik's, living proof that curses could be transformed into blessings. Word spread through the kingdom like wildfire. The risen queen, who'd been declared barren, now carried the next generation of their united realm. People called it a miracle, a sign from the gods that their new kingdom had divine approval. Aurora knew the truth was simpler and more profound. Love had made the impossible real. Her love for Malik, the deity's love for her after a century of companionship, the kingdom's love for the peace they'd built together. As her pregnancy progressed, something remarkable happened. The land itself seemed to flourish. Crops that should have taken months to grow matured in weeks. Game animals multiplied. Rivers ran clear and strong. The divine blessing growing within Aurora radiated outward, touching everything around her. "You're glowing," Malik said one evening, running his hand over the curve of her growing belly. "Literally, there's silver light beneath your skin." The babies, Aurora explained, feeling them move under his touch. They're already manifesting power. Not dangerous, just present, alive, divine and mortal blended perfectly. She felt his awe through the bond, his fierce protective love for both her and their unborn children. The traditionalists who'd questioned her rule fell silent. Even the most stubborn couldn't deny that the queen, carrying divinely blessed children, was exactly what their kingdom needed. When Aurora's water broke 6 months later, the entire capital held its breath. The birth was long and difficult, but Aurora drew on her divine power to ease the pain, to ensure both babies were healthy and strong. When the first cry rang out, a son with his father's golden eyes and his mother's dark hair, Malik wept openly. The second baby, a daughter with amber-silver eyes and power that made the air shimmer, followed minutes later. Prince Kieran and Princess Lyra, Aurora announced to the gathered court, holding her children close. Heirs to a kingdom built on love and sacrifice. May they always remember where they came from. Malik kissed her forehead, his hand gentle on their son's tiny head. They'll have the best teachers. A mother who chose mercy over revenge, and a father who learned that strength means protecting, not conquering. Aurora looked at her mate, her children, and the kingdom they'd built together through pain and transformation. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." And in the capital square, the people celebrated their queen, their king, and the divine blessing that promised a brighter future for all their kind. 5 years later, Aurora stood on the balcony of the royal castle, watching her children play in the courtyard below. Prince Kieran, now 4 years old, had his father's tactical mind and his mother's compassionate heart. He'd already mastered his wolf form, a beautiful black beast with amber-silver eyes, and loved organizing elaborate games with the other pack children. Princess Lyra was quieter, but no less powerful. Her divine blessing manifested in gentle ways, flowers blooming where she walked, injured animals seeking her out for healing. She'd inherited her mother's gift for protection, her father's fierce determination. "They're growing so fast," Malik said, coming up behind Aurora and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Soon we'll have to start their formal training." "I know." Aurora leaned back against him, content. "Kieran wants to learn strategy from you. Lyra wants to study the ancient texts with Theron." "Both excellent choices." Malik kissed her temple. "They'll be ready when their time comes to rule." Aurora looked out over the capital, at the prosperity they'd built together. The markets bustled with trade from all territories. The training grounds rang with laughter, as well as the clash of practice weapons. And beyond the walls, the kingdom stretched out in peace. Forests healthy, rivers flowing, packs living together in harmony they'd only dreamed of 5 years ago. It hadn't been easy. There had been challenges, setbacks, moments when Aurora wondered if the cost of unity was too high, but they'd persevered, together. "Do you ever think about how it started?" she asked quietly. "You breaking into that chamber, waking me to use as a weapon?" Malik's arms tightened around her. "Every day. And every day I thank the gods I was smart enough to fall in love with you instead." "You weren't that smart." Aurora turned in his arms, smiling. "I had to flee into the wilderness and nearly die before you figured it out." "Details." He grinned, then sobered. "Aurora, I know I can never fully make up for what I planned to do. How I saw you at first. But I swear." She silenced him with a kiss. "You've more than made up for it. Look around, Malik. This kingdom, our children, the peace we've built, that's our redemption. Both of us." Through the mate bond, she felt his love for her, as strong as the day they claimed each other in the ruins. Stronger, even, deepened by 5 years of partnership and trust. A howl rose from the forest beyond the capital, the evening pack run beginning. Aurora and Malik had made it tradition. One night a week where every wolf in the capital, from the highest alpha to the lowest omega, ran together under the moon. "Ready?" Malik asked, his eyes already beginning to shift. Aurora called to her children, who came running with excited yips. "Always!" They shifted together, Malik's powerful black wolf, Aurora's magnificent silver and white form that still carried traces of divine light, and their children tumbling around their paws in smaller wolf forms that would grow with time. As they ran through the forest together, Aurora felt the presence of the deity woven through her consciousness, not separate anymore, not fighting or struggling, just part of her, peaceful and content. "Thank you," she thought to it, "for trusting me, for becoming my partner instead of my prisoner." "Thank you," it responded, "for showing me that love transforms everything, even gods, even monsters, even curses." Aurora howled her joy to the moon, and her family's voices joined hers. Behind them, the entire pack echoed the call, hundreds of wolves singing together in harmony. She'd started as a princess who sacrificed everything to protect her people. She'd become a queen who'd learned that the greatest power wasn't destruction or control, but the courage to choose love, mercy, and partnership even when the world demanded violence. And in the end, that was the only magic that truly mattered. The curse had become a blessing. The Sleeping Beauty had awakened not to captivity, but to freedom. And the monster and the butcher had found redemption in each other's arms. As dawn broke over the kingdom, painting the sky in shades of silver and gold, Aurora ran beside her mate and thought, This is what happily ever after truly means. Not an ending, a beginning,